So we have a TT instrument cluster that's coming to us for repair, and this has a heat related problem. In fact, it was rejected by another repairer as non-repairable. As you can see at the moment it's kind of working okay, but if we spin the cluster around, and you can see here the two MCU chips. This is the smaller one that gives most of the problems, and if we were to spray that and cool it down with some freezer spray like this takes the temperature of the chip down to below freezing, and as that cools off, you can see the cluster's shut down. So we're seeing this more and more now with these clusters. So this requires the CPU to be replaced and reprogrammed. Here's the HC908 MCU removed, the old one, and the new one here is already soldered in place. And there are a couple of lifted pins on this that we need for the programmer, so we haven't programmed this yet. And we remove this by using the old chip, by using this hot air desoldering tool here, which we run around the pins to melt the pins and melt the solder on the pins, and then lift the chip off the board. And requires the correct heat to make sure that we don't damage any pads, but that's the way we remove these devices. So the next step is to connect the programmer and then program this device with the right firmware. Programming almost complete. Done. We've reprogrammed the HC908 processor with the right software, and you can see there's a replacement chip on the back there. Now, if we now use the freezer spray again on this, and we freeze it again, it goes in this, you see, cool it right off. You can see the ice forming. There we go, frozen up. And we turn around to the other side, and you can see the cluster is now performing as it should. So another TT cluster repaired. So now we're going to run diagnostic tests on the bench on this TT cluster, and we're going to use VCDS, which is the popular Volkswagen Group car diagnostics system. And here's the adapter here. Normally plug into the car. Of course, here it's into our test loom through the test box, which then in turn plugs into the cluster. And we have VCDS running on the PC here, so we can select the instruments, and VCDS will open up the window for the instrument cluster, and it will show us all the pertinent data. The cluster there. Here we can choose various functions. So we're going to do output tests here. So if we choose output tests, and then we look at the cluster, and we choose the first test to run, and this is an analog gauge sweep. This will sweep all the gauges to maximum and then park them. So it parks the rev counter at 3000 RPM, temperature at 90, fuel at half a tank, and speedometer at 62 miles per hour. The next test is the instrument warning lights, so we can see 4 on there, 3 on there, so there should be 7 displayed in total for a UK spec cluster. Then the gong, and then segment test for all 3 displays. We didn't fit this LCD, but it is in perfectly good condition, and the odometer there. So they're all good. And the next test simply fades in and out the brightness, backlighting slowly. And we can complete that set of tests. It takes us back to default mode. If we look at the test box around the back here, you can see we've got some additional features here, so we can switch the ignition and lighting on separately, and we use this to check for parasitic drain at the end of our testing. We've got a couple of switches here to simulate the inputs for the temperature gauge and the fuel gauge, and this is very important because some cluster faults don't show on VCDS diagnostics, but they do show up with these tests here. And we have the indicator LED tests, so we can just see those working here and here. And then these 3 buttons here are to simulate the trip computer stalk control, so trip computer on and off, and then up and down the menus. So this gives us a fairly comprehensive test. We additionally now started using our test computer here, custom made for our own use, and we use this to simulate the CAN bus interface going into the cluster, so we can drive engine revs through the CAN bus and put a signal in which also tests the speedo. So we've got a pretty comprehensive test now on these clusters to make sure that when they leave, they're working fully. So that concludes the testing. Thank you for watching.